and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast of jaded optimism with me, Yoros Panagiotidis, and all of the world's anger compressed into a small, tiny, minuscule package.
Ben Maddox.
I'm angry, Georgios.
Why? It's nice. Look, the sun is out, even in Berlin. It stopped raining. The weather's, well, but the temperatures are up. I don't know what you would have to be upset about.
But that nice man, stroke lady, has been fired from the White House.
Oh no, again? They do go through their men, women rather quickly.
Frankly, I've been looking at the download numbers, Georgios. I'm not happy with them, so I thought if we threw a bit of John Oliver-esque political satire into the show, then maybe we get a few more listeners, you know what I mean?
What, the download numbers from the White House?
Exactly. I think POTUS hasn't got enough followers.
I always assumed the download numbers from the White House all come from Russia.
Yeah, and I have privy to them because me and old, what's-his-face, white-haired man, we're actually secret friends.
White-haired man?
What's his name?
Bannon.
No, WikiLeaks man.
Oh, Julian Assange.
Me and Julian Assange. I mean,
Right.
I forgot his name there, but that's just because, you know, he's a ghost. He's a secret ghost fixing the world's ills, and that's why you forget his name, obviously.
Yeah.
Anyway, Georgios, what are we talking about this week?
We are talking about the myth of punishment.
Now, you're going to have to help me. You sent me this as a topic.
Yes,
you,
I did.
You wrote to me, and you said, what's the topic this week? And I said, I don't have a brain pan.
Yeah.
And I said, you've got to do something. And so you did. You sent me this.
Yeah, I did.
And as, you know, I fully respect any idea that you have.
Yes, I know.
I totally accept on face value what you're going to do, except I have no idea what that means, so take it away.
Well, the idea basically originated from, let's call it a semantic quibble I have.
Okay.
But that as I thought about it more and more, I realized there's something underneath that semantic quibble that seems to suggest something that I'm actually not that comfortable with. So the semantic quibble is this. We like to talk about games that give us harsh consequences for our actions, or that force us to take risks, or force us to make decisions that will have long-lasting consequences that might be detrimental to us, as punishing. These are punishing games, like Agricola is called a punishing game.
In the Year of the Dragon is apparently very punishing. I've not played it, but apparently it's very punishing.
Exactly. So, on face value, that's fine. You know, some things are just, you know, it feels like punishment when you make a certain decision, as opposed to, you know, being rewarded for it. But as I thought about it, well, why that phrase didn't sit well with me, I realized, you know, in order for something to be a punishment, there needs to be a transgression first. You need to have broken some rule, or if not that, you need to have committed some kind of sin. And both of these suggest that there's some outer framework, some kind of moral framework baked into the game that sort of rewards one thing and punishes another.
Okay, so now,
yeah,
this is an interesting idea. Firstly, I would say that the logical sort of progression from from punishment isn't sin necessarily. I mean, it's a very specific punishment for a very specific transgression within,
fair enough,
within our moral code. But also, is there not a specific form of punishment that comes from games? It's a specific kind of, in the sense that you don't get punished for what we would assume in the normal world is punishment, for a transgression of a moral code. But within the world of games, simply playing badly is what earns you the punishment.
Yeah, but again, now we are sort of conflating what I would argue as a moral framework, rules as a moral framework, as opposed to a technocratic framework, let's call it that. The idea of the more efficient choice, or the choice that overall leads to a more efficient path to a specific result, in this case a lot of victory points, is deemed better than the one that isn't.
Well, of course, it is better. It's quantifiably better.
Oh yeah, no.
It's more, and sort of within the framework of the game, right? It might be points. I mean, I think we're both thinking of a kind of a Euro game when we think about this. But there are different kinds of games, and you get different punishments for different outcomes. If you look at social deduction games, for the inability to hold your own counsel, there's another sort of punishment.
Yeah, but
you get to give away your role or whatever.
But then again, the word punishment is very specific to Eurogames, though. I don't think anyone would argue that social deduction games are punishing, or they would argue that a traditional, very let's say, cliche, a stereotypical dudes on a map, Ameritrash game is punishing.
Well, certainly would. I mean, people would describe Arkham Horror or Eldritch Horror as punishing, for instance.
Really?
Yeah, and co-op games especially, they would describe as punishing. There's a sort of relentless pressure the game puts on you that could be adequately described as punishing.
Yeah, again, that's just the first step. Although what I'm trying to get is, I'll get to that later. First, let's just make my point clear. I'm not arguing that games that give you harsh consequences don't exist, or that we don't need a way to describe them. Because yes, they do exist, and yes, we do need a way to describe them. And yes, punishing is a common way of describing them. I would just start it, but that, the use of that term sort of made me think, in that there are a lot of situations where we take similar choices, and we never would describe our decision process as punishing. Like if I were to buy a new laptop, and I know occasionally you are not particularly happy with your laptop, I love it. You mentioned at one point.
I never shouted at George.
Yes, I know. But if you say had some sort of regrets over purchasing that laptop, I mean, if you put them side to side, you basically saying, I made a choice to buy this laptop, the consequences of which if it's not working, suffering now. But you would never consider buying a laptop a punishing decision. You would never say, I didn't take the optimal choice in laptops, but you would never argue buying a laptop is punishing, because we are very much I think my argument is still that it is tied to some sort of reward for good behavior, and good not just being productive, but evaluative good, and punishing bad behavior because it's bad. It's non-productive is some sort of a failing.
Well, where I disagree with you actually on this is, well, firstly, I believe that words in different contexts have different meanings.
Yes, you're semantic relativist.
We had something of a nice use of the jargon there.
Yeah, I know.
We had something of there was an argument. It was a little mini argument a couple of episodes ago.
What? Us?
Where we were talking about something and I used a word and you said, yes, but within academic theory, this word means this. And I said, well, that's likely, but I'm not using it in that context. I'm using it in the colloquial context that most people take it to mean. And I think in this, for instance, punishing in a board game context means something different. It means the game it's not a transgression of morals so much. It's a transgression of what is. This is going to sound like I'm self-contradicting, but I think if you look at good and bad as a moral distinction, there is a certain sort of destruction, a certain willingness to destroy social mores in bad behavior, and a willingness to uphold them or improve them with good behavior. Essentially, transgression of social mores is morally bad, broadly speaking.
Right. Go on. I might be able to jump back on the wagon once I figure out where you're going with this.
Whereas I don't think that sort of moral landscape. Now, I think it can bleed over, and I'll come on to that later. We discussed this before. But I don't think that moral landscape is applicable to the world of the game. It's good and bad means something different. Right. Good and bad means, if you want synonyms for it, optimal and suboptimal. Oh, yeah. Which is very different to good and bad, as in good and evil in a moral sense, right? And so punishment means a different thing because what you're being punished for is contextually different to what you would be being punished for if you stole a car, for instance.
I don't disagree. I mean, I might have taken a different route. Our esteemed contributor, doctor, philosopher, grand Renaissance man,
and gorgeous, almost semi-divine supermodel.
Yes, well, mostly supermodel. We try not to be so superficial.
Quick sidebar, right? Quick sidebar. You know this story, but the people don't. So on Sunday, I had a game day,
right?
And some fans from South Africa were visiting Berlin.
Well, let's not call them. Let's call them friendly listeners who were kind enough to drop by and not point and laugh at us.
I'm saying founds, Georgios.
Fine.
I've got to get my kick somewhere in this world. And so before Georgios arrived, I said, "You can tell me. I won't tell anyone. But who's your favourite?" Fully expected them to say me because I'm gorgeous. You know,
You are aware that this is an audio medium, right?
that's why I can say outrageous sentences like that, Georgios, and not fear the kickback. And they said Nick Bloody Mariner. They said Nick Bloody Mariner.
They didn't say bloody.
No, I've added the bloody
okay.
because I'm outraged that it wasn't me. So, Nick, you're very popular down south.
That sounds odd. Anyway, yeah, roundabout way. Nick, on the other hand, a few episodes back, applied a Nietzschean argument to board games, borrowing from Nietzsche, saying that if you submit to a moral framework, you're basically the morality of your actions is predetermined. Sort of in my. Now I'm going to have to sort of slightly criticize Nick Marin, despite, obviously being much more popular than I am.
And semi-divine. I need to.
Well, yes, but he's
this.
only semi. So I think we're kind of even there.
He's got his semi on all the time.
That's what semi-divine means. That is true. I think he didn't use enough context in applying this argument from Nietzsche onto games. Because if you look at Nietzsche, he was basically arguing against the concept of Christianity as your guide for morality, as sort of submitting yourself to Christianity and giving away the ability to self-determine your morals.
Which is
this big point.
When you have
Nietzsche.
this notion that there's a being in the sky who is omnipotent and omniscient, therefore it robs you of your ability to act as a moral person in the world because everything is predetermined by the man with the beard.
Yeah, basically somebody else determines what's good and what's bad, what's right and what's wrong, and you don't.
Taken to its logical extent in Calvinism, right? Which says that there are an elect that God has predetermined will be going to heaven, and there are the rest of us who will be going to hell, and any sort of outward act of immorality is just simply that perdition manifesting itself in the world.
Yeah, I never warmed to Calvinism. I don't think anyone does.
I mean, how could you? It's absolutely batshit crazy. There's no redemption in Calvinism. That's the real nihilistic thing. There's no redemption there whatsoever.
Yeah, well, going back to Nietzsche, basically, Nietzsche was big about people determining their own morality. The whole concept of the Übermensch has nothing to do with whatever the Nazis turned that into, but the idea that a person capable of determining their own morality, their own moral standards, their own views and understanding of the world is so much more enlightened and elevated than a slave, which is there's this term that Nietzsche uses. The idea that if you submit to somebody else's an external framework of morality, you become a slave. Again, notwithstanding all the other connotations that word has.
And of course, modern neuroscience is essentially elevated the slave to the only option. There is a large strand in neuroscience that says pretty much free will doesn't exist, that literally how you're going to react in any given situation is determined by a combination of your genetics and where you were born.
That's a highly dangerous argument to make, and a lot of neuroscientists argue that
there are lots of people who make that. I mean, especially
but a lot of people argue that the concept itself is highly dangerous and highly destabilizing of social coherency. So
there's many unintended consequences. But even so far as, I mean, I'm not saying I believe this necessarily, but even so far as the neurons in the brain fire before you've consciously decided to make the decision.
Right.
And so there is some sort of instinctual thing at work which robs you of any agency, and essentially free will is an illusion. Yeah,
and there were actually people arguing that in front of a court, which is sort of points you to the direction why this idea is very, very dangerous and shouldn't be just applied to anything willy-nilly.
And we'll get back to it in a minute, but why people haven't applied that sort of Newtonian and then quantum mechanics idea onto this confuses me. Because it seems people are perfectly happy in physics to say, okay, quantum things work to these set of rules, and sort of Newtonian things work to these set of rules, and we haven't quite brought them together, but we've seen both of them happening.
Right.
And they both coexist.
Right.
Whereas sort of in this sense, they go, oh no, well, because the neurons fire earlier, it dictates we have no free will, and they map that onto the rest of the world, which clearly doesn't work, because we clearly do have free will. I mean, so, right, an example for the audience. I am taking this pen, and you're going to explain to the audience what I'm doing with this pen right now, okay?
Right. You're choking on it. I think what you're basically doing is...
It tastes so good. Oh, I hope it tastes
He's using it like you would a cone of chocolate ice cream.
You see? I chose to do that. That ain't neurons firing off, compelling me to fillet a pen, George.
Yes, also, you chose to alienate about 40% of audience, so now we're only 8 people.
Sorry, I'm just really good at fellatio. Anyway, carry on.
Right. I have no idea how to go back to whatever the point was earlier.
We were talking about Nietzschean sense of...
morality.
The Übermensch, we have no morality, right?
Exactly. No, it's not that he doesn't have a morality. He determines his own morality, which is the point.
Or you choose to defer your moral agency to a greater power.
Exactly. And this, I think, this seems to be the argument that was made about games, that once we enter a game, we defer our morality to the game mechanics. And this is where I take issue with the argument.
Okay, you're going to have to help me with this, because I listened to the next bit and I didn't really get it, because I'm not very bright. Just break that down, what it means.
Well, I should have listened to it right before recording this, and I didn't. So I'm very sorry, Nick, if I completely mangle your arguments. I don't mean it. There's no mean spirit in my argument. It's just what I understood.
We all know, Georgia, CNN is ISIS. So if we can't fake news with the best of them, what is the point of it? CNN is ISIS.
No.
Anyway, so deferring your morality to the game mechanics. Just explain how you conceive what Nick said to mean.
Well, he was basically comparing these two, an idea that the set of rules basically dictate what is, again, good or bad, as opposed to productive or non-productive. And since our engagement with games in general is about achieving victory, therefore everything that helps us achieve victory within the game rules is good, and anything that sort of keeps us from achieving victory is bad. And again, it's this overlap of a moral connotation to certain outcomes as opposed to a purely productive connotation.
Okay, so the Nietzschean idea, if I understand you correctly, is that you don't take the conventional moral codes. You develop your own morality and live your life according to those.
Yeah.
Okay. No one does that, right? Unless you're a sociopath. Social mores, moral codes. So, I mean, to take an example, I don't know, in certain societies. Okay, I'm going to take an example that's pretty uncontentious, I would say. Within the Spanish football world, especially the South American football world, to feign injury to gain advantage is not only advantageous, but considered okay, actually admired. The ability to be able to pull that trick off, to lie to gain advantage, is to be admired. Whereas in English football culture, it is derided. People still do it, but it's still derided. And so people are less apt to do it within that structure because people live by the mores of their society, right? And that's a rather fatuous example, but I wanted to use something that wasn't controversial or something. But we step out of the mores of our society at our own peril, right? This idea that we just determine our morality based upon what we consider to be moral is sociopathic. Right? No,
I think this, to a certain extent, this is sort of the narcissistic idealism that Nietzsche, I have to admit, I haven't read everything of Nietzsche. I've read some of it. But if you were to bring up an argument against this idea of the Übermensch, it's basically what you're saying. It's the idea that if everyone is free to do whatever they want, they will choose the worst possible option, which is essentially, I do what I like and screw everyone else.
Libertarianism, essentially.
Yeah, basically. But... And even for
and by the way, just a sidebar, all these libertarians, oh no, it's actually fine, and as long as you don't bother me, no, libertarianism is batshit fucking crazy. Carry on.
It's juvenile. That's what it is. It's absolutely immature. But anyway, I think now we once again alienated some more listeners. Great.
Bye, Jeff. I don't know. That's not Jeff Reales. That's just a bloke called Jeff.
Yes, I'm sure we have a listener with Jeff who just go, oh no, they're wrong. Click, delete. Anyway, no. The argument basically is that, and this is actually when you read, what was it? Also sprach Zarathustra, one of the big seminal Nietzschean works.
Also spoke
Zarathustra,
as he calls it. That's one of the. That's also a piece of music, isn't it?
Yes.
It was 2001. Boom, 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 boom.
Pretty much. But basically, the main argument that I think Nietzsche either explicitly or implicitly puts up is that, which is basically what Zarathustra goes through, is that he goes up to the mountain to contemplate, to look into himself, to reflect, and that is how he develops his moral code. So it's very much, it's a weak argument against this idea of, people just be animals and just, be selfish to the extreme. It's the idea of, once you understand everything, you will develop a moral code that just doesn't put just your own personal desires at the top and wants at the top, but in the sense that it's all part of a bigger deal. Ultimately, this is also one of the main arguments for anarchists. Why anarchists believe what they do. They also believe that, if people were to sit down, reflect, think about everything and not just themselves, they will realize, you can have a moral code developed not because somebody told you that this is right and this is wrong, but because you understood it yourself. It's a very appealing idea. It's a very idealistic idea. But again, the flaws should be apparent in basically what you said. You can't account for everyone having the same level.
Or frankly, anyone, if I'm being honest. Frankly, anyone. Everyone is petty. Everyone is selfish. Everyone gets up off the wrong side of the bed and says things and does things that they later regret. This idea that we have this capacity within our brain for ultimate enlightenment, it seems to me utterly, especially within any normal society where you've got to feed yourself and clothe yourself and maybe some offspring you have and maybe look after a dog and some parents and also care about the rest of the world and whatever else is going on. This idea that we have this capacity for enlightenment is pure candy floss, right? It's utter hogwash.
No, I disagree with that. I think the idea that our best selves are available to us all the time, I think, is dangerous. I think that
that's what I'm saying. I mean,
it sounds slightly different when you phrase it.
It's impossible.
It is impossible to do it all the time, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for it, and it doesn't mean that we should assume that you cannot ever reach it even for a moment. I think the idea. What I'm trying to say is that my issues with both Nietzsche and anarchism and a lot of these idealistic ideas, even something like communism, is basically that you need to account for people making mistakes. You need to account for the incompetency principle.
And we spoke about this before, and this is why you have institutions, right?
For example.
And you hope that institutions have working practices that are as close as can be idiot-proof, and therefore you're able to compensate for the guy who didn't have sex the night before, or only had 2 hours of sleep, or the woman who almost got into a car crash on the way to work and so is mad as hell, or whatever, all of those sorts of things, right?
Yeah. By the way, you're listening to Perfect Information Podcast.
It's a board game podcast.
It's a board game podcast. And we'll get to board games at some point, I'm sure.
Okay, so mapping this back on to games then. So we live in this moral state, and the game rules dictate this moral state, and you're all serving essentially the Lord of Victory points, and you're morally good if you play optimally and get loads of victory points, and you're morally bad if you don't.
Yeah. So I think, basically. And ultimately, this is where I take issue. I mean, the same point you brought up earlier, that the fact that games are moral. If they reward in any way, in any sense, anything, it's efficiency and productivity, which in itself is an interesting observation, the idea of how easily we fall into this trap of equating productivity with morally good and lack of productivity with morally bad, because that says something about us as a culture, I think.
Well, it's about getting stuff, isn't it? Especially Western culture. Because we've transformed from citizens into consumers, and it's in the interests of those who are profiting from our consumption to keep us consuming as much as possible. Docile, fatted cows in a shed waiting to be slaughtered, right?
Well, but if you think about it, I mean, if that were the case, then wouldn't people be interested in keeping the consumer cased? Inefficient, because the more efficient they become, the less they consume, because they become more thrifty. They use whatever they purchase in a more efficient way, therefore undermining the lack of purchasing new stuff.
Well, I wonder with games if we've seen a sort of rise in that, or whether whether it's just broad changes in game design, or whether there's something about the current social situation, the stress people are under, that they don't want to be punished when they play games. But if you've noticed, there has been a large change from the sort of early to mid 2000s in terms of how difficult games are, how you have to combat against the game system, towards this everyone gets to do everything they want. It's just who can do everything they want better than everyone else, right? So if you look at In the Year of the Dragon, if you look at Agricola is a great example. Agricola and Converna are two really good examples to put side by side. One is really tight and difficult and hard. And believe me, I know if you make a few wrong decisions, you can absolutely tank the whole thing. Whereas Caverna is a lot looser, a lot easier. There's a lot more paths to victory, and so therefore you have it's less punishing, to use the word. And you've seen many games swing towards that, as opposed to, you're In the Year of the Dragons, your Agricolas, those sorts of things. And I wonder if it's because people have seen a profit in creating a Skinner box, right? You hit the button and the peanuts come out.
No. I think it has anything to do with Skinner boxes. I think what it comes down to is this understanding amongst designers of incentives, of reducing frustration, and of using the effects and the consequences of your decisions within the game system as a way to entice you to be further invested in the game. And ultimately, I think
it's Gilhover sort of in sentiment thing, Fiore moment sort of idea.
Also, yeah, but basically, there's a certain hesitance, I think, among designers, among certain publishers, I guess, to produce games that have strongly frustrating moments, because you don't want to sort of scare away your customers, scare away your player base because they played a game, they were really frustrated and threw it away. Like, Ignacy Trzewiczek recently, like not too long ago, posted this blog post about, don't criticize a game after you've played once or twice and say it's imbalanced because you lost, or it's broken because you lost. It's basically saying that there's a certain, I think.
What's changed then? What's changed that Agricola is totally acceptable 10, 15 years ago, obviously not 15, In the Year of the Dragon, these sort of games, Notre Dame, through the ages, these games that are, whether you like the word or not, punishing, difficult, they inflict damage upon the players, and now so much more games. So if you look again at the change in worker placement,
right.
It was, worker placement used to be delayed gratification. Everyone places all of their workers, then it resolves. And it changed very, very quickly from that to you place, you get your stuff, which is the Skinner box aspect that I'm talking about. You hit the button, you get some peanuts.
Yeah, but Skinner box is a bit more complicated. I think I'm not really comfortable using the term within board games, but let's put it aside. I think ultimately one aspect, I'm not saying it's the only, but I think one aspect of it is the fact that designers and publishers are very much aware that they need to fight for their audience. They need to grab them as soon as they can with the game, pull them in, and keep them and entice them enough to actually buy a copy for themselves. So basically, unlike what Ignacy tries to argue, people play a game once or twice, and if they're too frustrated, they will just abandon it, talk badly about it, and just turn their attention to another game, because there are lots of very interesting and appealing games out there. And if they don't get you immediately, you worry that, if you don't get your audience immediately, I assume designers and publishers worry that they lose them forever. And so moments of frustration are removed. They're sort of diminished. They're basically one of the things, I keep coming back to this example as if I hate the game, but I don't hate the game. But Scythe was a game where I felt it had no edges. There was no, the negative consequences of any of my actions not being perfect was that it just slowed down my game. I never felt like, I risked something and I lost something. I always felt like the only thing I lost was time. That was the first game where I noticed this, and where a few other games that followed that I played, they don't come to mind right now, where I felt in a similar way. Basically, the game did not want to provide me with too much frustration at any one point, because they didn't trust me that I would be able to handle it and still enjoy the game.
Right. Okay, so just moving towards wrapping this up now.
Yeah.
You opened the gambit with this idea that you don't think the word punishment is an adequate term.
Well, yeah, no, it's the idea, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what do we use instead? Where do we go from here?
I think,
Sweet child of mine.
I think harsh consequences is a way of describing the same idea. I'm not saying people shouldn't use the word punishment. That wasn't my original intention. I dislike it because of the connotation that I associate with it. it's not so much that punishment, I think, is the wrong term to use so much as the thinking behind it, or what I consider the reason why it comes so naturally is that we quickly associate good and bad with it, like morally good and bad with it. And the winner is somehow in a morally elevated position or whatever, or all these arguments that sort of are tied into this idea of morality within a game. And I would argue it's that, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this also to do with Nick's bit, namely the idea that a game is moral, and B, that once we agree to play this game, we sort of submit to its morality is dangerous because it sort of excuses ourselves from being in control of our actions. Basically gives every bad player an excuse to say, I'm not the one you should be mad at. I'm not the one who did this mean move towards you. It's the game. I have to do this. It's not my fault.
So this is where I stand on this.
Right.
I think the word moral is wrong. I think it's the wrong word to use and therefore promotes a wrong reaction to the word punishment, in the sense that being good and bad at a game, and if we just look at a sort of the standard sort of Euro game idea of scoring points and using efficiency to do so, I don't think it's a moral question. I think it's a technical question, and I think it's a question of ability, in the same way as you could argue sport isn't a moral thing. You're good at football, you're bad at football. That doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you a good person. Therefore, the word morality is muddying, and it's a nice idea, but I just don't think it's correct. Now, where morality does come in is what you just mentioned now, which is the through the ages thing, right? Which is the game allows me to completely ignore what's going on around the table. The game allows me to ignore whether I'm upsetting somebody. The game allows me to ignore whether someone is getting unduly unhappy at things I'm doing.
Yeah.
That is a moral question.
Exactly.
But not scoring points, or you can say, I'm subscribing to the game's morality. But my point is, in that context, morality is the wrong word. You're subscribing to the game's rules of success or failure, I think is a better way to describe it.
Exactly. And I think it's important to keep in mind that the game itself rewards productivity or efficiency, but not morality. And the morality, as you said, and that's basically what I was trying to get at as well. Morality is what happens above the table. Morality is how you treat other players through the game. And if you are the kind of person who treats other players badly because you score more points that way, that is a moral decision. And in the sense that, to a certain extent, those decisions aren't, there's no reason to get up to feel like you're being a bad person because I did something that, scored me points or blocked a space that you wanted. That in itself is not an amoral or immoral act. But the entirety of the game experience, the way you treat another player, the way you take into account, you empathize with other players and their experience, and you are invested in providing a better experience for everyone, not just for yourselves. That is the morality of a game. And that is the morality that we should be worried about. And that's definitely the morality that we do not hand over to a game, because the game has nothing to say on this.
And that's why I have no issue with the word punishment in the context of subscribing to the game's
I also know the
ideas of success or failure. The reason I have no issue with that is because punishment in that context means something different, and I think we have the cognitive capabilities to understand the difference in meaning, and the shades in meaning are the same word.
Well, yeah, if we do when we think about them. And
no, I think we do instantly, and naturally it's something human beings do. I think there's a difference. I think absolutely there's a difference. Everyone instantly knows the difference between the rat's card in Through the Ages and going to prison for stealing a car. Everyone, and they're both called punishment, but we know that one punishment means a completely different thing to the other one, and we instantly recognize that because that's what speaking a language is.
I think we're talking about on different levels here. I'm saying that people respond to the connotations of the word punishment when used in a game, and even if they they know they're two different concepts, they still share something. Otherwise, why use the same word?
And on this, Georgios, we can all go up to a mountain, meet Zarathustra.
No, he went down. He's not on the mountain anymore.
Oh, right, that's good, because he probably stinks because he's from the old times. and they didn't
Yes.
shower him very much. And he probably lived in the desert, didn't he?
In a mountain in the desert.
Actually, it was a mountain in the desert. Zarathustra. They all lived in the desert, the old lads with the beards.
No, I wouldn't know.
Moses did. Jacob did.
Oh, he still me quit.
Nigella did. Anyway, so I'm going to go and work out my perfect morality, and I'm sure part of it involves getting drunk, running down the street with my pants around my ankles.
Yeah, and hoping for punishment, isn't it?
If you'll allow me a couple of minutes of indulgence, I want to talk about the campaign that's being run by Game Changers in Uganda. We've spoken about this before on the show, and it's important to speak about it again. Game Changers' goal is to bring games to people who've never had games before. On this show, we talk about more than whether games are fun and if you should buy them. We want to look at games as social artifacts and the value they can have away from the table. Nothing highlights this more than Game Changers. Game Changers held a convention in Koro, northern Uganda last year. Children walked 10 kilometres each way to be there, every morning and through the evenings, and every day there was a queue of new game players looking for transport to the venue. Game Changers want to expand on the great work they've already done, and this is why they're running this new campaign. With the money that you pledge to Game Changers, they want to expand on the convention held in Koro last year, form regular clubs in both Koro and in the south, in Gulu, where they're based, acquire new games so kids can have access to them, foster creativity and nurture budding game designers so that you could be playing something from one of these kids in the future. Game Changers are already changing lives, and with your help they can do even more. But don't take my word for it. Here are some people who know a lot more about it than me.
Hi everyone, I'm Susan. I'm just 14. I like board games because board game teaches many skills like problem solving, creativity, and planning. My experience in living in the village of Uganda, because most people won't understand the importance of board games. That's why I've come out with an idea of drama to help them understand.
Hello, I'm Beckham and I'm one of the founders of the Uganda Village Board Game Convention. We are running an event called the Game Changers. My role in this event is to travel to the rural areas to research and record local stories and legends from elders and meet the other kids who have the stories. And these stories will be changed and transformed into adventures and new board games.
Hi, my name is Ronald. I am 13. I like playing board game because I enjoy working out the strategies which help me to win. And so far, I won 2 board games, which is Seven Wonder and Alhambra. And it helped me to gain more confidence in doing complicated things at other board games. And at schools, I do many complicated things.
Hi everyone. I'm Sion and I'm 14. The most board games I like is Lost Legends. I really enjoy the part of picking the right card at the beginning to defeat the monsters. So I'm planning to go to Koro to teach these board games and others that I know.
Hi everyone, my name is Susan. I'm 14. The board game I like playing is Alhambra and Forbidden Island. If I'm compared to the board game in the village, they are very colorful and more challenging.
At the time of recording, they're already well on the way to ensuring the game nights in Koro and Gulu happen weekly, but they're not there yet. You have about 5 days when you're listening to this, so plenty of time to dust off your credit cards. If you can help, go to crowdfunder.co.uk/game changers and pledge what you can. Any amount will help and ensure that these kids can continue to play games. Matt Leacock has a message for Game Changers.
Hello Game Changers, this is Matt Leacock wishing you all the best with your upcoming training and with all your projects yet to come. Good luck!
If you agree with him, go to crowdfunder.co.uk/game changers. Now, enough of this earnestness, back to something considerably more facile. Is that your name on the list? Well, get in there then. Get to the bar and get buckled. Welcome to the guild.
It's always the same, grunting noise. You sound like, and I'm sorry to say that to your face now, an old man.
All right, don't laugh at me.
All right.
I saw something the other day.
That's not funny.
Georgios.
Yeah, it's kind of
So
funny.
we discussed, right? We discussed, the issue, Janine and all of that sort of stuff. And
The batteries, I remember.
Right. Well, she was out buying some shopping.
All right.
Right.
People buy things.
I walked into the living room,
People walk there.
tripped over, accidentally
Open her diary.
tapped her code into her phone. Phone accidentally snapped open. As I was grappling to get back up, accidentally hit the call history button on the phone.
It's what people do, yeah.
You know what I saw at the top, Georgios? At about the same time she had put the phone down to me and said, "Oh, I want talking to no one."
I don't know, a picture of a cat with an ice cream cone saying, "Ooh, I'm feezing it."
One word, Georgios.
Feezing.
Costas.
Oh yeah, I know someone who's Costas.
We're going to have a chat later. What was the question this week?
Oh, the question was, which games are most dependent on the group and which are the least? You were hoping for a list, weren't you?
I was hoping for a list, didn't get a list, but I got some great answers. So, Mr. Moser, Dave Moser.
Dave Moser does something very interesting. He distinguishes between different genres: party games, social deduction games, and dexterity games, as well as Euro cube pushers. He says party games, group is key. Social deduction games can sometimes even be fun with a less than great group. Dexterity games, different groups will make for different experiences. And Euro cube pushers like Agricola, group basically doesn't matter.
To what degree do you agree or disagree with him, Georgios?
Let's start with the top. Party games, group is key. Only in the sense that you shouldn't play a party game with people who aren't willing to play party games.
Right. I mean, there are certain sort of snobs, game snobs.
Yes.
Who will just snort derisively.
Yes.
When they play Pictionary.
Yeah, I'm assuming you're speaking of yourself. I do know your stance on Ugitect.
Well, Ugtect is fucking zany, and zany ain't funny.
It's a party game, though.
If anyone's zany... Well, but what's that one? What's the one with you have to draw you get a word and you have to draw the picture and then you pass it on and they draw the picture. Telestrations.
All right, okay.
I mean, Telestrations is amazing. It's hilariously funny.
It's very zany.
There are good party games and there are bad party games. I would suggest that Ugtect is a bad party game, whereas Telestrations is a very good one.
Yeah, but then again, you're reserved in English, and I'm not, so I kind of like Ugtect.
I mean,
Architect is stupid.
If I was thinking of an adjective to describe me, Georgios, reserved would be the one I would choose.
I would as well, yeah.
So, okay, the one that's the most contentious, I guess, from your perspective, is Euro cube pushers like Agricola.
Yes.
Group basically doesn't matter.
Yes.
As long as your opponents are clean and polite.
Yes. And I don't agree.
Come on, then.
I'm not saying... All right. First of all, let's be fairly... I'm not saying Euro games or Euro game cube pushers, whatever you want to call them, are on the same level as, say, this party game or, say, social deduction game, which relies on people actually having to talk to one another. That's obviously another factor that can screw up the general atmosphere at the game table. I mean, if you need to talk to one another, things get misunderstood, somebody might be upset about something, somebody might feel left out, whatever. This is obviously not going to happen with a game where you're primarily focused on your own little tableau and just staring at numbers and trying to figure out the best way to do certain things, when you're very internal in your engagement. But still, these games, and tying back to our topic this week, are very much group dependent if the rest of the players act in a certain way towards you. If they're the kind of people who will just go, well, this is the most efficient move and I don't care about any drawbacks it has for other people. I couldn't care less if it upsets you, if it sort of undoes the work you've put into the last 45 minutes of gameplay. I get one more point out of it, therefore I will do it, even though I'm way in the lead. Interesting enough, I'm reminded of a situation we had when we played that Cosmic Encounter riff of the Iron Throne game something.
It wasn't very good.
It wasn't very good, no. But there was a similar situation where one player had the option to do something that negatively affected another player, and they did it even though it had absolutely no benefit to them at this moment, because it allowed them to do it. Because there was no negative consequences for them, but negative consequence for somebody else. They did it. They sort of increased their lead towards at least one other player, so therefore it was the best possible move.
Well, I think there are groups which thrive on that, who don't have an issue with that.
Yes.
And there are groups that sometimes don't. So me as a player, I kind of don't care until I do. And then there's loads of factors that lead me...
opportunist morale.
Right. There's a load of factors that lead me towards, being annoyed or not. And there are certain games that push that button unfailingly through the ages is one. When someone goes up on the military and says, let's not do military. That annoys me. But, I think we've discussed this. And I really do think, on a scale of being group dependent, those Eurocube pushers are the least group dependent out of all the sort of broad genres of games. Would you concede that?
No. I'm not willing to sort of blanketly say they're the least group dependent. I think they depend on different aspects of the group than a social deduction game does. Social deduction game, I'm thinking of Resistance in particular, needs people to give information, either through conversation or through purposefully not communicating verbally at certain moments. You need to be able to pay attention to all the information people give on purpose, accidentally, subconsciously, whatever. If you are not able or willing to do that, if your group is not able or willing to communicate on that level or register on that level the experience, you're going to have a tough time having a lot of fun with this game. And in the same sense, that obviously doesn't hold true for something like Agricola, something like Through the Ages, something like what's a Euro game I've played recently that I liked? I don't remember. I've played. Oh, let's say like Concordia. I love Concordia. They do not depend on this level of group skill.
So they're less group dependent?
No, they depend on another set of skills. In this case, they depend...
Being able to sit down.
Being able to sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Balance the need of you to win with the need of the group to have fun. Because this is basically the point where all these Euro games, let's call them all Euro games, sort of all fall flat for me once they do fall flat. They don't all do that. The experience sort of falls apart for me the moment where I feel people are sort of ignoring everything about the game but how to win themselves. This pure focus on me getting mine. This, I think, if you're not willing to at least allow for some flexibility on that point, I'm not going to enjoy that game.
Well, I think if you wanted to put them in a table, a league table, which I do. I like quantifying things.
A league table?
Yeah, like number one, most group dependent, top of the league.
All right.
Right? I think they're empirically less group dependent. I think it's clear.
Well, that's nice, but you can't invent your own facts, man.
I am inventing my own facts. What bloody world do you think we live in? Just because you disagree with me also doesn't mean I'm inventing my own facts.
No, you said empirically and statistically.
Right.
That implies facts.
Well, then we'll do a bloody vote on the Twitter.
That's afterwards.
We'll do a vote on the Twitter.
No, you can't post facto come up with facts. You can't say, this is a fact. We actually haven't established it. I just think it's a fact, and then we'll prove it. That's a hypothesis.
That's the scientific method. Yes, it's a hypothesis.
No, first, yes, it's a hypothesis. It's not a fact.
Well, I will then go and using the medium of Twitter.
Oh, yeah, afterwards we can agree on that, but now we can't.
Right. Using the medium of Twitter, I will then prove that it's a fact that people agree with me.
No, you can't prove something as a fact. You can prove a hypothesis.
I can prove my hypothesis to be, without any reasonable doubt, true. All right?
Yeah, fair enough. I don't know if that's actually true.
Derailed now. I have no bloody idea what I'm talking about. Well, anyway, Euros are less bloody group dependent. Anyway, Georgios, Grimbalina.
Yes.
Young Grimbalina. She lives in a castle far away over the mountains. They have ruffly flags with caps on them.
Well, it might just be Grim Bow. A bow might be short for bow, and bow might be just very grim. And a guy wearing flannel.
Where's the Lena come from?
Because he's very lean.
All right, so Grimbalina, what does they say?
What does they say? They say social deduction needs flexible people, those who don't mind lying and deception, although you don't have to be good at it. You have to be able to roll with the situations and enjoy the flat games enough to have the occasional ripper. Euros like, say, Castles of Burgundy, just not be a crazy psycho. That works, depending on your definition of crazy psycho.
Well, I mean, for me, the only thing, we're coming back to this, Euro games group dependent, we seem to have, our boat has crashed on a shoal of our Euro games less...
Yes, because you're throwing facts and hypotheses together.
It's the pedantry that I really get sexually turned on by. But it's true. It's just, you can pretty much have anyone. But that's, I'm going to go away from that. I mean, I'm just going to say for me, I think really the biggest sin in Eurogames is taking forever to determine. That's the one thing I'm getting less and less patient with. Is just
yes, you were very patient about AP before,
right? But I find it hard not to see it as rank selfishness.
Yeah.
And
again, rank selfishness. It comes down to selfishness. This is the same argument I'm making as well. I mean, it's difficult to be selfish in a game in the same sense. Selfish and negatively impacting a game if you play Resistance than if you play something like, I don't know, Castle of Burgundy.
You're saying it's easier to negatively impact a Eurogame than it is the Resistance. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying
that's absolutely insane.
No, yes, but that's why you don't put words in my mouth, because I own my own insanity.
I asked you the question, I put a question mark, and I said, if that's the case, that's insane, by the way. So I now give you the floor to defend yourself.
Well, I'm not going to defend that. But I'm going to say is what I'm going to say is I think Eurogames need set different challenges to groups than say social games. Let's be specific. Let's just keep referring to Castles of Burgundy and Resistance.
Okay.
Because I'm tired of just saying Eurogames all the time. Right. The Resistance puts up different challenges to a group than, say, Castles of Burgundy. And selfishness, which is, the one trait that you feel is the reason for people being AP, is also the reason why I think Eurogames, if they fall apart.
Also, I think it's fear as well. So I can also be kind of a bit more sympathetic with this idea that people are so stressed out with the thought of looking stupid that they will take hours to. I mean, that's also a justifiable argument.
Also a variant of selfishness, because my own fear is more important than you actually enjoying yourself.
Right, but one is kind of fear's kind of difficult to control, right?
A lot of things are. But anyway, yes.
My bowels.
Yeah, so basically, selfishness is an issue with Eurogames, I think. It's a stronger issue with Eurogames than it is with the game like The Resistance, because if you try to be selfish in The Resistance, there's no place for it. It's not that you can't be, it's just it has no effect on the game.
Okay, I fundamentally think that's wrong in that, I mean, it depends. Selfishness is dominating the space in which the game is getting played. And I have seen many, many games of Resistance where one person just will not allow anyone else to speak.
But that's bad play. I mean, that's just people playing badly as opposed to
I don't think it affects
the game.
I don't think it affects the result of the game necessarily. It's just one person.
No, I think it does.
I just think it's one person is being selfish. One person is refusing to let other people speak.
Well, that is
the same thing. That is the same thing as AP, essentially. And it's very... I have seen the Resistance derailed by grumpiness and people shouting and people just dominating the space. And not me, by the way. I mean, surprisingly, I have reasonable sort of social skills sometimes. But I think it's absolutely... I think it's much easier to tank the Resistance than it is Castles of Burgundy. Much easier.
I haven't played both enough to really compare the two.
Anyway, so Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
What does Mrs. Smith say?
Negotiation games. For example, Bonanza is a good game, whomever's playing it, but it's a fantastic game. The cutthroat, unforgiving way my friends play it.
And this is a really good point, right? Mm-hmm. So this is where your organisation of a game group, I think, has an advantage over my organisation of a game group. So you have a regular game group of sort of regular people who you've tried and tested.
Yeah.
But it's kind of harder to get them together so often.
In the same constellation, yeah.
Whereas I can have a game night any night of the week that I want, absolutely no question. If I wanted to do it 7 nights a week, it wouldn't be an issue. But I'm rolling the dice to some degree with who turns up.
Right, yeah.
So if you're talking about simple group dependency, that can just be dictated by who's sitting around the table regardless of what you're playing, right? And so she seems to have the sort of ideal, the ideal, what people want, right? Which is people who sit around a table and just jive with each other.
Yeah.
The way they play the game jives with everyone around the table and improves it, makes a good game great. And I think we would both agree on this. I'm always a little bit reluctant to say statements like that because I expect...
No, I agree, yeah.
But, I think any game, regardless of how well or badly designed, can be elevated by having the correct group of people sitting around the table playing it, right?
Not the game, but the experience, yes.
Well, I mean, it can make... Okay, I think we agree.
Yes.
It can make a bad game feel good. It can make a great game feel excellent.
That is
right?
true, yes. I'll go along with it happily, yeah. Definitely. I think that was the last episode we talked about, or the one before, we talked about how the group and the game are sort of two huge factors that result in the actual experience, and it's not one or the other. It's a mixture of both. I think that's how you end up with situations where, let's say, game with notable flaws is still loved by the group because the group manages to just pick it up and make it work. And also the other way around, how a game that's by all accounts tightly designed, well-oiled machine, really fit for the purpose it sets out to do, but if the group that picks up that game just completely runs counter to it in everything, and all the assumptions the game design makes about player behavior, it's not going to be fun.
And there's also some sort of, and I don't know what this is, but some sort of unquantifiable atmosphere that exists in the ether that can make something on one night fantastic and the next night fall down. I've had this as an actor many times, that you do a show one night and it's absolutely amazing and there is this lightning captured in a bottle, and the next night you do the show and you don't really do anything different, but it's 50% as good.
Right.
And you can't put your finger on why. And I think that also exists within gaming. You can play one game one week and it's just brilliant, and you get the same group of people and everyone's kind of the same state of mind that they were the previous week, and it just doesn't fly quite as well.
Do you think it has to do with the fact that the first time is discovery, the second time is repetition?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at the acting thing, no, because often that happens in the middle of a run.
Right.
Where you've been doing the play for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And you'll just have one night that's just spectacular for no good reason, and the next night just isn't as good.
No, fair enough.
I mean, especially just digressing on the old acting thing, for me, sort of the first week and a half constantly improves anyway because rehearsals are never long enough, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Danny Perillo, the tire magnate, who I notice hasn't donated $1 million of your dollars yet.
Well, you were asking for a pin-up calendar.
I haven't got that either, Danny.
That is true.
I know you live in Canada and postage and that, but, an email just to say it's on its way would be nice.
He makes an interesting distinction in that he says, it's if gaming is a social activity as much as an intellectual exercise, then any game needs the right group. They're games that will likely appeal to a larger number of people and could therefore be seen as not as group dependent, but I can't think of a game that wouldn't fail if presented to the wrong people at the wrong time. And I think that's worth pointing out. Yeah, that's definitely the case. And I think, and I agree with that. Group dependent, if anything, means, or rather non-group dependent, just basically means a wider range of people can get together to play it.
Right.
Which ultimately, I think, implies also it has less assumptions made or baked into the design than a lot of other games. So by extension, the more complex the game and the more intricate the game, the less likely it is going to be that it will appeal to a great number of people.
Yeah, and I think it's that thing that, broadly speaking, games with interesting decisions but a low entry point tend to be the ones that are least group dependent, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah. I mean, the less... Again, it also comes back into the idea of accessibility, and that ties back into some, let's say, Spiel des Jahres this year. An accessible game ultimately flattens the decisions to a point that they will not be a challenge, not be an obstacle, a hindrance to people sitting down to play the game, while still trying to be interesting enough to have them return to the game. So there's this magical tipping point somewhere in between really flat and dull decisions and really, really complex and wide-ranging decisions, what have you. That's just right, and that will allow maximum mumba a maximum number of people to sit down and have a good time with the game.
All right, well, Georgios.
Yeah.
Or should I call you Costas?
No, you don't have to. It's not my name.
I think we need to go and have a chat.
I don't think we need to do that at all.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
No.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review.
On this week's BBC World Service Spoiler Story Hour, we have...
Arkham Horror.
If you listen to this recording, I am most likely dead.
He isn't.
I expect to have fought valiantly and heroically against the cosmic horror come to devour us all.
He didn't.
My trusted revolver, a handful of allies, and some unsettling clues will have probably led to my doom.
Really, he mostly ran away screaming.
But don't weep for me. There is more at stake than the fate of some dashingly handsome ne'er-do-well. Unspeakable terrors, cultists, and madness abound here in Arkham. Nobody knows why this sleepy little town has repeatedly been host to the most outrageous and supernatural occurrences known or unknown to man.
Ask FFG's accountant, maybe.
This ordeal has already left its mark on me and my compatriots. We are as scarred by the things we've seen as we are determined
to run away again.
We grabbed what we could and left behind what dead weight we had in an attempt to stop the slow descent into the abyss. I do not know if we have succeeded, but I urge you to join us.
For the low, low price of 15 quid a month.
Truly, there are indescribable horrors in the cards for Arkham tonight.
Yeah. Skip to the end.
It's the one sentence review.
This game is immersive, engaging, and tells a ripping good yarn. But the level of commitment it demands is horrific.
Arkham Horror the card game is dense, inventive, and challenging. But this alluring package comes at a terrible, terrible price.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
Ooh, look over there, Georgios.
What?
The elephant. He's just removing his white hood there, and he's
Are you calling our elephant in the room a member of the KKK?
Well, he's just put his smouldering cross.
Well, maybe he likes branding things.
You know, if it walks
maybe he's a Christian branding other elephants. Maybe he's a brainwashing elephant.
If it walks like an elephant wearing a Ku Klux Klan costume and quacks like an elephant wearing a Ku Klux Klan costume, Georgios, well,
you are
then it's
screwing up your metaphors, yeah.
So the question we're asking here is something I've noticed on Twitter recently. I notice it periodically because Cthulhu is one of the predominant themes.
Because it's in public domain.
Well, I think it's public domain, but also, I mean, I fell in love with Cthulhu sort of about 20 years ago. The sheer sort of nihilistic cosmic horror of the whole thing is very engaging. And the way he invents a complete other history for the world is very engaging. But people are talking about, can we, considering that H.P. Lovecraft was tricky, in terms of
tricky. That's a nice way of putting it.
In terms of his ideas about social cohesion, in terms of his ideas of eugenics, and there are some who say, I don't know enough about this to be able to adequately say, so I will say there are some who say that...
Ah, yes, the fox speak.
There are some who say that his racism was considered beyond the pale even in his own days. So can we, as sort of good, rational, caring people...
Or, critical.
Enjoy Lovecraft in the modern age, considering the man himself had some ideas that were pretty abominable.
Sure.
All right, expand. It's a podcast.
Well, I think the tension comes, of course, from this idea of separating the art from the artists and their voices. I've heard people argue that you should do that; it's the right thing to do.
I think you should. My 10 cents on this is I absolutely think you should, but I'm just not sure you can.
Yeah, see, I'm the other way around. I'm saying you shouldn't, but I think you can if you want to.
Well, I think it depends on the art, right? So if you look at Lovecraft, there's one story in particular, and I can't remember the name now. It's something like The Place at Red Hook, which is, it's basically a huge diatribe on immigrants coming into America. Everything starts to go wrong as soon as people with brown skin kick the nice white skinned people out. And
they're nice white skinned people?
Well, in Lovecraft's world, right?
I see, that's why it's high fantasy.
Right. And so the implication there is clear what Lovecraft is trying to say. Now, in Lovecraft's defense, just quickly, he did change his opinions later in life. He actually, Shadow over Innsmouth, he didn't release while he was alive because he was concerned over the eugenics in it. He was concerned over the politics. He mellowed in terms of being an outrageous sort of eugenicist later on in life. But is that enough to forgive him? And can we enjoy his work?
Yeah, I don't know about forgiveness. I'm thinking no. And well, let's layer the opinion. A, I don't think we can forgive him. B, I don't think it matters if we do.
Well, no, I mean, he's fucking dead and he's been dead.
Exactly.
He's been dead for a long time. So whether we forgive him or not is
irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think also, I mean, if you want to be really, really, particular about this, the xenophobia, the racism is deeply encoded in the entire worldview of the Lovecraft universe itself, with this idea of the different, the weird and the strange being horrible and demonic or demonic equivalent, and just, rotting influence in everything that's good and right with the world. I mean, it's no coincidence that somebody who would write stories like Lovecraft did would sort of lean towards, well, racism or xenophobia, because they prey on the same fear of the different, of the other. All that said, I personally always enjoyed Lovecraft's stories because of the way, I think a friend of mine put it in a tweet very nicely, where he starts, what he saw was indescribable horror, and he will describe it now. Right. And then he runs down these really, really weird ideas.
I mean, he's absolutely the king of the italicized final sentence, Lovecraft. Like, almost every story is, and I walked in through the door, and the man was a goat. He does that so much. And I think it's glorious. And actually, I think we can be, and I don't want to forgive Lovecraft the man, and I don't want to imply that his beliefs, whether they were in keeping with his times or whether they were over the top in his times, are in any way defensible. They're not. But I think there is a danger of mapping those beliefs too strongly onto his work.
I don't know. I've read a bit of Lovecraft. I haven't read everything. Maybe, I'm not sure whether it's such a bad thing to sort of map his beliefs onto the text, because it does give you it doesn't mean that you're engaging with the text more deeply and trying to figure out what it says, what it tries to say, or rather what it tries to say maybe, and then just enjoying the superficial spectacle of it all. Like I used to do. I like the cosmicness of the whole thing. I like the idea of dwarfing this human narcissism of being the center of everything.
I love that fundamental conceit in Lovecraft that we are at the edge of a universe somewhere and we are utterly unimportant.
Yeah.
There is things,
that's just funny.
There are things going on that are just beyond our ken, and if we were to know them, our brains would explode. And frankly, whether our whole solar system is just destroyed by the sweep of a grand cosmic hand has absolutely no effect on what's happening in the grander universe. All of that stuff is wonderfully sobering and very intelligent and great fun. And the stories are great fun. Now, if you're mapping onto this game, I don't think there's any queasiness or issue, because fundamentally it's not H.P. Lovecraft. People have taken the properties of H.P. Lovecraft and then they've mapped them onto modern values and ideas. So some of the more problematic things that crop up in H.P. Lovecraft do not crop up in Fantasy Flight Games, right?
Right, yeah. Of course. I mean, you have heroic characters that are not just white.
Right.
And also women. I don't know.
Well, the classic sort of middle-aged scholar is the archetypical Lovecraft hero, right? Okay. And Lovecraft is interesting because he puts those people at the center of stories, whereas usually the sort of boys' own weird fiction stuff, it's usually American men with guns who are very action-filled and they can jump through trains, whereas he put sort of wizened old men at the center of stories,
Sure.
which is very interesting.
Well, the games, on the other hand, do return to this idea of, a stick of dynamite, a gun, will help keep Cthulhu down, which is also, I guess, to a certain extent, in keeping with Lovecraft.
Yeah, but I mean, the heroes, if we're talking about the heroes,
Right.
You have women from Africa, you have poor people, you have your standard Lovecraft heroes. And I think, that's definitely the influence of the modern day upon the Lovecraft mythos. And I don't have an issue with that.
No, I don't either. I think, like I said, I enjoyed Lovecraft for certain things that, for the most part, removed from his personal politics. And I don't mind picking these elements and putting them into a game and using some of the imagery of Lovecraft fiction to sort of package a game and make it more appealing. So I don't have an issue with it. I don't think people have to have an issue with that.
Yeah, and I don't think, especially if you're looking at modern FFG games, that Lovecraft's morality is a question. Because if you look at the history of literature,
right,
the archetypical characters have been taken and molded in each era for their own ends. There are feminist retellings of fairy tales, for instance. It's a very big thing, right? And you take these archetypes and you twist them to your own desires, and I think that's perfectly fine. And I think Lovecraft's monsters especially have become those kind of archetypes that each era can take and mold to their own particular needs.
Really? Do you think the monsters are representative of the fiction? I mean, the visuals, yeah, but the monsters themselves?
Yeah, for sure. Cthulhu and Azathoth and the Hounds of Tindalos.
But how are they different?
And Nyarlathotep. Well, because...
Nyarlathotep.
Well, I guess I don't know the fucking pronunciation, and you're not an ancient Egyptian either, so shut your face.
Well, you claim I'm not.
But... yeah, I don't know. I mean, especially in FFG, the monsters are very different. The monsters are bosses that you can destroy, whereas in Lovecraft, they're absolutely undefeatable unless you drive into their stomach with the prow of a ship, it seems. But, but they're utterly undefeatable, unquantifiable, far greater, far more powerful than us. And FFG have utilized them as ender-level bosses, essentially, which is kind of an issue I have with some FFG games, but yeah, FFG have taken them to their own ends, and I think we will see people reinventing Lovecraft his monsters.
Yeah, I think the visuals are very striking. The I'm not going to say tone, but just say the general style of like 1920s Arkham, old bookshops, libraries, museums, these kind of places. That are supposed to store knowledge in some sort of way.
And when I think of Lovecraft, I don't think of these dusty old men who narrate the stories. I think of the Hounds of Tindalos. I think of the Migo. I think of Cthulhu and Azathoth, who sits there with his crazy violin players playing around him. I think of the monsters.
Right, yeah. No, I think you can pick and choose a lot of things from the Lovecraft universe, adapt it and turn it into something that sort of leaves the, let's be very euphemistic and diplomatic, questionable parts of the mythos behind. I think that's perfectly fine to do so. And I think what we're seeing now with the Cthulhu role-playing game most of all, and later with the board games, is people doing just that, yeah.
Right.
So, what did you think of my interactive candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
All right, so we've never played this together.
That is correct.
We've played this separately.
Yes.
Because you've got a dirty foreign version coming in and lowering the tone of our great Anglo-Saxon society. See what I was doing there, Georgios?
No. I don't see a difference from what you usually do.
Okay, fine. But that's off mic, love. That's off mic, usually.
All right, fair enough.
So, tell us about your experience with the game. Have you played it with more than two, for instance?
No, I've played with two players. All three scenarios on the base game, I've played with two players. Or was it one scenario? I'm not sure. There were quite a bit apart, which might have impacted the experience overall. At least has exacerbated one of the, I think, weaknesses of FFG's Arkham games, which is basically they are very dense in rules, and you will often quickly or repeatedly misapply a rule or get a rule wrong, or just, forget that a rule exists and need to look it up again. This is something that happened with when I played Arkham Horror. It happened when I play Elder Sign. It happened when I play the Arkham Horror, the Living Card game. It also happened when I play Eldritch Horror. I'm not sure if I've played any other Cthulhu games from FFG, but it happens. It happens again and again. I think the template for that was sort of set up with Arkham Horror itself, that these games need to be these monsters of rules. Like there's not just, hundreds of exceptions, but this micro mechanism, and they work together here, and these deck of cards that have certain effects, and so on and so forth. To me, this seems to be the running thread through all of those games. They are never simple, sleek, or straightforward. They're always dense.
Yeah, and I think FFG have a habit of that anyway, but I got this game with a little bit of trepidation.
Right.
In that I don't like their Arkham games. I don't think their Arkham games are mechanically very interesting. I don't know whether I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but in Eldritch Horror, there's this mechanism where you have to roll dice to see if you can buy a shotgun at the shop. I'm not sure if I've mentioned that before. But anyway.
No, I don't think so. I think most people, except for the people who went back to listen to all of our episodes, you haven't mentioned it in the last 3 or 4 months, so no, they won't know that.
Anyway, you do, and it's fucking moronic.
It's an abstraction. It's a simple abstraction. That's all it is.
I'm not getting into this argument, but anyway. So I had the desire, but I want to give them always the chance because I like H.P. Lovecraft so much, and I want a game to be good. The first role-playing game I played was Call of Cthulhu, and it was absolutely transformative, just wonderful. And so I always wanted an Arkham game to be good.
Right.
And I bought this with trepidation, and I bought this after a number of reviewers had come out and said it was great. And so that's encouraging.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought it ostensibly as a solo game, and then I realized I just don't like solo games.
Right.
And
really surprising.
Yeah, my experience has been very similar to yours in that it's hard to I find it hard to just get 2-player games.
Right.
So I think if this was a regular meetup thing with 3 or 4 players, that would be fine, but fuck you, I'm not buying a second base box. I'm just not fucking doing it.
No.
You're not going to fucking gouge me for money like that. And there are some people who absolutely adore buying as many fucking copies, but I won't. I want the game to be playable, right? So I only play with 2. But what I found is when I did play it, how immersive I found it, how mechanically rigorous, unlike their other Arkham games, I found. So really enjoyable mechanics, really good fun, deck building actually being fun, which is something I've never done before. And the way it kind of evoked, because it focused small, and the first scenario, without giving anything away, is just you open up in your study, seemed very Lovecraftian to me. And just instantly I was engaged. Instantly there was tension, and they have the resolution mechanic where you're drawing those tokens out of a bag. It's just so much fun and just so full of tension. And I found the game worked on both levels for me, experience-wise. We'll get more into this in the design, but I found in terms of what it does, in terms of immersing you in something that feels Lovecraftian, but also being a proper game that has proper decisions and proper mechanics. I think it did both wonderfully well, and I fell into them very quickly.
I wasn't quite that enthusiastic, but other than that, I don't disagree with what you said. Yes, it's immersive, it's interesting, it's a game, it's meaty. I had issues with, again, the rules density, which was something I kept coming back to, and it might have been because we had about a week between plays at times. That might be a bit much, but then again, I have so many games I haven't played in a year almost, and I can still sit down and explain them quickly and play them without any issues right now. So yeah, that was a bit of that was difficult. I liked, the experience was interesting because without, jumping straight into the design bit, the scenarios in the base box are quite inventive for what they do. And it sort of suggests that a lot of really, really interesting and appealing ideas are going to show up later in the series. The first expansion, which I haven't played, and which I won't play for reasons I'll talk about later, is most likely full of really, really clever ideas of how to use the cards to create a unique gaming experience. And I really like that about this. I like the most fascinating thing, I think, what's most amazing about just this being a basic card game, is the spatial element.
The spatial innovation in this game is so exciting. I remember when I got to the second scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
And you lay out the grid of the town. I thought it was so cool.
Exactly,
and I just thought, wow. And we're laying out a map of the town on these cards, and it's brilliant. All right, let's talk about price, Georgios.
Yes. Arkham Horror, the living card game, is expensive. Not just the base box, but also the fact that it comes as scenarios. It doesn't come as, well, there are 2 apparently print-on-demand scenarios you can buy individually, which aren't yet available here in Germany, in German, just in English, which is fine for you, but no use for me. But the first big box, the Dunwich something or other.
The Dunwich Horror, I think.
Probably. It's the first big box, includes 2 or 3 scenarios.
It's 3 scenarios again.
3 scenarios again. And then the campaign continues with 7 individual scenarios to wrap up the entire storyline. And each of these packages comes at 15 quid. Or if you look for a price, maybe 12 euros, 13 euros, somewhere around that. Keep in mind, I used to play Netrunner. Netrunner used to come with the same size boxes costing 8 or maybe 9 euros. So there's a price hike of about 4 euros per package. If you sum it all up, you want to have a complete experience and complete, a complete campaign of Arkham Horror, which is promising to be inventive and exciting and immersive. It's going to cost you, assuming you've bought one base game, one big box expansion, and all the chapters, is going to be about 120, 150 euros.
Right, and here, so if you take Descent.
Right.
Which gives you an entire scenario, an entire campaign in the box.
Right.
Which you can probably get now for 60. For probably half of that price. Now, if you want to play with more than 2 people, Arkham Horror, then you have to buy another base box 2, minimum another base box 2, which is another 35, 40 euros on top of that. So if you're looking for a multiplayer, if you're looking for a 4-player experience, one of the scenarios is going to cost you 140, 160 euros.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I agree with you. It's bloody insane.
It's, just to make sure now what it is that I'm objecting to. If you really love this, if you have the money to spend, then by all means spend it. But what makes me queasy about this idea is that it sets a precedent. And I think if we go back, you had similar reservations about one of our first favorite games, Time Stories. How one box costs you about 30, 40 quid and it's one scenario for one night, or maybe 2 nights if you can't finish it, and that's it. Arkham Horror, to a certain extent, while ostensibly can be replayed.
I think I've replayed, now in its defense, I've replayed the base box a couple of times.
Right.
And it's fine, actually. It works because the decisions are still being made. There are still things you have to do. You don't get that initial surprise at the narrative, but the mechanics and what you have to do in the combat and the getting through certain things. And especially that second scenario where you have to go through the city and collect the cult members.
Right.
All of that is tense enough to allow you to replay it.
No, it works as a game, but what makes the game stand out and what makes it so appealing is the exploration effect. It's the surprises that you encounter as you play the game, and they're only available to you the first time.
I'm not entirely sure. We'll go on to this afterwards, but actually that aspect, I'm not entirely sure I agree with you on, just through my own experience.
Right.
But I think broadly speaking, you're right. I think broadly speaking, this game is bloody expensive for what it is. I think I was really surprised because I bought the Dunwich expansion and I bought a couple of scenario packs.
Right.
And I bought them because I'd ordered them from a friend who sells games and I didn't feel good about leaving them with him and going, no. But once I realized how much they were, I very nearly walked away. I mean, I think it's really expensive.
Yeah, I'm definitely walking away from this game. I think and I can afford to walk away from the game, even though I quite like it, because there are more than enough games out there. Either on my shelf already, or you're waiting to be picked up by me soon, that are far, far cheaper, that will give me almost the same experience, or even increasingly better experiences without expansions if I keep playing them. And I don't think that, I'm not sure how often I can play the base game and feel like, oh, this is better than last time, because I don't think it will be.
So what do you get if you mix together sexual frustration, hatred of the world, and congenital stomach problems?
That's basically you.
That's design. Okay, so brief digression on price, and I think broadly speaking, that is a factor that you have to factor in with this game. But for me, I think the design of this game is really good. I think the decisions you can make, the actions you have are a lot of fun. And I think a lot of it centers around this resolution mechanic. Mm-hmm. And basically what you have is tokens that you pull out of a bag, and they have numbers on them, and they add to, so you play cards with certain values, and that gives you your strength if you're going into combat or you're going into stealth or whatever, and you're going up against a monster's number essentially. And then you draw this token as a modifier, and they have few positives and lots of negatives.
Obviously. And,
you know, that's that sort of Lovecraftian thing that everything's really difficult, right? And I am no probability guy, but the amount of times that resolution mechanic has just promoted great surprise or last minute success from the jaws of defeat is absolutely amazing. And that must be something in the number, something that they've run has made that happen, because it happens so regularly that it's no longer a coincidence.
Possibly. I haven't actually paid much attention to that. I think, while I do like the back mechanism that you draw tokens out of it and you can adjust the difficulty depending on which tokens you put into the bag, which is great, which is really clever. I think one of the most interesting decisions I often found myself making when I played the game was dealing with your card hand, because you have two ways of using your card. Essentially two ways of using your cards. One is playing them for the effect they have. Like, I now equip the flashlight. I now equip the knife or something. They have a secondary effect. You can discard certain cards because they have small symbols on the side to use them as a throwaway bonus on your ability to increase your chances of winning something.
Or someone else's skill check.
Which makes it, at first glance, this makes it, of course, a very useless proposition. The idea of, this is too valuable a card. I put it in my deck to have this ability. I'm not going to throw it away. But then you run into exactly what you described. You keep drawing negative modifiers. You keep going like, ooh, this is difficult. I need to discard these cards. I need to let go of these things, even though I really, really want to play them, because otherwise we're going to stumble right in the first few attempts we make, and we're never going to get anywhere.
And I think that simple thing of, you're having a round, you do your actions, and then the monsters get to go.
Right.
And it's a very simple thing. It happens in a lot of co-op games, right?
Yeah.
But it really ramps up the tension. And then you find yourself with two cards, both of which seem really cool, but one of which has to go.
Right, yeah.
And that decision's great.
No, I think that it was a quite clever way of how to sort of make you both invested into your deck. Because the fascinating thing is that the more care you put into which cards you put into your deck, the more agonizing the decisions are going to be later on in the game. I think this is really, really cleverly done, in that they seduce you into increasing your chances into doing something, and by doing so, making these decisions more difficult for you.
And I guess most people don't put cards. I mean, there are some people who are high-level players, and of course will do this, but there's people who don't. You don't put cards in your deck based upon the ancillary symbols on the side. Yeah. You put them in based on what they can do that's super cool. Right?
Exactly. So basically, and even then, I think we should also, I guess, kind of point out that the deck building element that I mentioned isn't as dominant as in other games that have
It's not like Magic, right? You have your standard deck, and you're upgrading some cards or adding one or two.
Right. So basically, at the end of the base box, you will have about 4 or 5 new cards, slight changes in there. So it's nothing major. And I'm not sure, as far as I understand, you don't continue with your deck in Dunwich, but you put together a new one.
Having not done it yet, I can't tell you. I mean, 2-player game, getting people together is difficult.
Oh yeah, I know.
That's why I need a significant other who plays Arkham Horror, the card game, with me, Georgie.
Well, that sounds like a Tinder profile waiting to happen.
Indeed.
Yeah, so basically, this is one of the things that's quite interesting about the design. There's the bag element, there's the way the deck building is constructed, but then there's also this idea of your characters having individual cards that sort of add to the background. I think I've played with, it was the waitress or the oh no, it was the other woman, the librarian, who's a little crazy apparently, at least supposed to look crazy, and then she gets this Necronomicon, and the more you use the Necronomicon, as everyone knows, the further back in time you travel.
Yeah, and they draw those, you have weaknesses in the deck, which is really nice, because you can draw them at the most inopportune times, and that's what makes the game feel like a story.
Right.
That you feel like, because narrative does that, right? I think Pandemic does this wonderfully well as well. This idea that, you know, if you see a movie and it's all a promenade to the end, the movie's boring. There's got to be moments when obstacles are thrown in front of the heroes. Yeah, having these weaknesses in the deck, that's what it does. It hits narrative points. It hits moments of climax.
Right.
And that is really, really interesting. And I think the design feeds into the stories in this game nicely.
Oh yeah, no, I think that was an interesting issue we had when we played this game, and I think it comes down to how well you handle the rules density of the game. In that, the moments where the game used to flow fairly easily, we drew cards, we played cards. There were sort of small impulses on the plot that allowed us to sort of construct a narrative in our head. Like, all right, I'm obviously, now that I'm in the city, I'm drawing my good friend, the policeman or whatever,
right.
who's coming to my rescue, and we'll now attempt our whatever objective we have together, and that works, and it's fantastic. But then the more often we ended up with a situation where we had to look up rules, the narrative fell apart. So this is really a tricky balance that you would probably have to handle as the player yourself. If you really need to have a strong grasp, or at least have one player with a strong grasp on the rules to allow the narrative to actually flourish, actually come alive. I think
this is their hope, I think, isn't it? That you stay subscribing to the game and you carry on playing the game with your regular group.
Right.
And so in the future, when you're in 8 scenarios down the road, you're not going to have those issues because you know everything inside and out.
Right.
I think the big problem is almost everyone I know who started with incredible wide-eyed enthusiasm collecting this game, after about a month went, too much.
Oh, yeah.
I can't keep up with this, and I can't keep paying the money. It's a lifestyle game, and I don't have enough money to devote myself to one game, right?
All right, yeah. No, I'm the same way. Ultimately, that was the reason why I dropped out of Netrun as well. I still have this huge collection. I'd love to sit down with another player and just put together decks and play, but I could not keep up with the release schedule. I'm not at that time of my life. I mean, I might have been during my school days or even early college days, when picking up one hobby item a month and, you know, sitting down, actually getting something out of it worked. It's simply not the case now.
I think LC, and this is where I think Fantasy Flight are doing great by LCGs, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's where the model falls down for me. Because I want other games too. And either I have a choice. I focus on, you know, I think a monthly release schedule is bloody insane. It should be a bi-yearly release schedule, and then I could be on board with it, I think.
Oh, yeah. Now, probably more than just a single pack. But yeah, it should be a bit freer, basically. It should allow for you to just get the new expansion. I'm not sure what the Time Stories release schedule is, but I think it is at least 2 months apart.
And I guess that comes into, this is still applicable to design in that we're talking about the design of the system here, the design of LCGs. And I think that for both of us is vital in us, the way we feel about the game. Because I think the fact that I know I'm not going to get everything, and the fact that I know I'm dropping out of the game negatively affects my view on it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Playing this made me want to play.
All right then, Georgie, what did Arkham Horror, the living card game, make you want to play?
Well, I already mentioned it during the review. I may want to play Netrunner again. I have a big box of Netrunner cards. I just need a player who's willing to sit down with me, put a deck together and just play a few games. I know there's this expansion, there's apparently standalone storytelling legacy style expansion for a ludicrous price. Truly ludicrous price for what's basically 2 decks of which you're only going to use a fraction. And I'm really getting a bit sour on FFG, or should I say Asmodee.
Well, Asmodee North America, isn't it?
Yeah, basically. So yeah, I'm not picking up any new things for Netrunner, but I'm happy to sit down and play my old Netrunner collection. Put together cards, play a few games, change them around a bit, change the decks a bit with the other cards in my collection, try again, stuff like that. I'd love to do that. I am, like you, I'm dropping out of Arkham Horror, and while I'm a bit saddened that I will not get to see the sort of the, I'm sure are going to be good ideas in the expansions, I'm just not willing to part with that much money to get them.
Yeah, mine is a game that has, well, if not narrative, sort of gradual game-changing rules implementation throughout the game, but you get the entire thing in one box.
Flux.
No. And I've tried twice, but I am determined to do this before the year is out. Right. I am determined to play through all of Fabled Fruit.
All right.
Fabled Fruit, and it's very similar in that sense as you get sort of narrative progression. There's not much of a story there. The mechanics change though, and it becomes more intricate and more thoughtful, and it introduces complexity wonderfully well. Mm-hmm. And so, you can say, although I didn't find it hugely difficult, Arkham Horror LCG does front load a lot of complexity, whereas
maybe it was just a translation of the rules. Yeah,
maybe and Fabled Fruit, isn't super complex anyway. It's quite a light game, but the way it develops and your tactics change from game to game is really interesting. And fundamentally, the reason it's different is you get the whole thing in one box.
Yeah,
and you can play through it all the way, and you can reset it and play it again because there aren't narrative surprises, because it's, mechanical surprises. There's less of that dependency and, oh no, I know what's coming. And you can play it through again and again and again, and you get the whole thing. So, Georgios.
Yes.
Should people buy Arkham Horror, the living card game?
No. Absolutely not. That is to say, if you're willing to sort of not experience a game that's otherwise good and fun, then no, you shouldn't buy it. I don't think people should support that kind of release schedule, that kind of business model. They're obviously trying to go both ways. They had a lot of success with Netrunner, which had these expansion packs which gave you a lot of cards to put into decks, to develop strategies, to expand the complexity. But there was never the necessity of picking up every single pack they released.
You're not going to miss a part of the story, right? Because there ain't no story.
Exactly. The story, if there is one, is the thing that happens in the metagame, is the individual story between the players that are playing. But you don't have an overarching story that you're missing out on if you skip a pack or two packs or even enter a cycle.
And I'm absolutely sure FFG would say to you, so I would say to you, I love this game. Actually, I'd say buy the base box, give it a go, because it's really good. But yeah, I agree with you on this in that you are going to feel unsatisfied. You're going to feel either compelled to jump in the whole way, and you'll sacrifice other aspects of your gaming to do it. But what is most likely, you're going to opt out after a month and then feel gypped.
Possibly, yeah. That's a bad way not the best way of putting it.
But it's
yeah.
true. I mean, I feel a bit gypped because when I bought the Dunwich Horror expansion, I felt it was going to be a sort of self-contained thing like the base game was. Yeah. And then you get the booklet out and you read it, and it's like, oh, there are all these ancillary ones. And I'm sure FFG go, oh, it's not necessary. It's not necessary, but if you want to get the complete picture, because by the way, FFG, you are heavily implying it's necessary to get the complete picture.
Obviously.
To do so. And so, yeah, there is a feeling of, there's a feeling of being gouged.
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
A feeling of being exploited to some degree. And so that would otherwise a fabulous game that has a lot of great decisions and a lot of great narrative turns might be a no for me too. No bloody poetry this week, Georgios. We're recording this a day before I go on holiday, so I want this done as quickly as bloody possible. Yes. So, how do they contact us?
First, I'd like to offer a little goodbye song that I've shamelessly stolen.
Don't! Holiday, Georgios.
It's the end of the show, as we know it.
Have you ever been shot?
I feel fine.
Have you ever been shot in the face?
In the face? No. No, not in the face. I've been shot at.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Anyway, back to the point, Georgios.
Yes, back to the point. R.E.M. were a band in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s.
From Georgia. And
Yes.
they were very good.
They were fine.
All right, now we're going to have a fight. Go. How do people contact us?
They contact us by talking to Michael Stipe, who will then tell you to instead go to infoperfected.com, not the website. It's infoperfected@gmail.com, which is the email. Haha. And there's Twitter, Infoperfected and Perfected Info. There's Instagram, Perfect Information. There's Facebook, the Perfect Information Podcast. There is probably a guild on Board Game Geek, the Guild of Perfect Information number 2348.
And if you want to help us, you don't need any more to go to the Byzantine support button.
No, which was Byzantine, which was really old and stuff, and also in German.
You can come to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/perfect information. You can subscribe, you can get a handle, you can get entered into our raffle where we give away shit. You can help us.
We actually give away games as well, not just shit.
You can help us create more content, maybe an RPG show, maybe some videos. And also, if you pay enough money, you get to come and have a drink with us in the guild. And maybe, if you keep your fucking hands and eyes to yourself, have a chat with Janine too.
Well, it's amazing. Also, Michael Stipe, if you're listening to this, I don't think your last album was all that great. You should do another one, go out on a high.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
Michael, call me. Let my people call your people.